If something could be unfathomable and entirely predictable at the same time, that was the mass shooting in Las Vegas. Entirely predictable is also a phrase that applies to so much of the politically charged reactions to the killing of 59 people by a man who lacked even the minuscule courage to face the people he intended to murder. The preceding hour of NBC Nightly News has covered the facts of the situation well. We'll endeavor to have a different type of conversation here, one guided by your questions and your comments that you have shared with us throughout the day. Our journalists are in search of answers and insight, and they will join me in turn here throughout this half hour. We'll have an update on the lone Coloradan confirmed to have been injured. He's a police officer. A family who lost a daughter in the Aurora theater shooting explains how they would like mass killers treated on TV. Sorting fact from fiction on guns and politics without debating the same old issues in the same old way. Did first responders respond differently in Las Vegas because of what was learned in Aurora? Tackling public fear and anxiety after tragedy. Your questions about how prepared local venues are, how to help tomorrow, and the very fair criticism of the media today on Next. We begin with an update on the only Coloradan confirmed to be among the 500 injured in Las Vegas. Curtis Leone is actually a detective with the Inglewood Police Department, obviously off duty at the time. His family says that he is currently in the hospital, is expected to survive his injuries. They did not provide details on that. And surely there are more connections to Colorado with hundreds injured in Las Vegas. We will share those details as their families feel comfortable. From the moment the shooter was identified, we heard from Next viewers asking why we were using Stephen Paddock's name and photo on 9 News. It's a fair question from Crystal, Robin, Chris, among others. No notoriety is the movement led by the families of the Aurora theater shooting victims. The idea is to limit the attention given to mass murderers. And as we've discussed here, it's a smart idea. It's backed up by social science research about the contagion effect. Think copycat killers. But the intention of no notoriety was never to black out the shooter's name, especially not in those crucial first hours when it's vital that a lot of people in the public see his name and his face so they can come forward if they know about him or his motives. Today, we spoke with the parents of Jessica Gowie, who died in the Aurora theater shooting, to discuss the reasoning behind no notoriety.
We know that they do this. They're going to commit suicide anyway, but they want to be famous or infamous, and they don't want to go out as an unknown, which they've been all their lives.
Once you've identified who the killer is, and once that story has been, okay, this is the killer, this is who he is, this is how old he was, this is a picture of him, then you stop. You stop. You don't need to keep showing that picture because the damage it does to those who have survived and those who are fighting for their lives is tremendous. Plus it encourages anybody else out there that's thinking, well, I want to be the next bad guy. And there are plenty of them, unfortunately. So we ask that those pictures are done away with, and then you start focusing on the survivors and the victims and telling their stories.
It is a very fair ask. We invite you to hold us accountable to our pledge to use the shooter's name and photo responsibly and to turn our focus away from him once investigators have gathered what they need about his background and motives. My colleague Chris Vanderveen, who will be here later, has offered a thoughtful explanation of this balancing act that we do as journalists to maximize information and minimize harm. You can read Chris's thoughts in the next section of 9news.com. It surprised no one here at Next that guns, gun control, and gun rights dominated the questions and comments you sent in today. William wrote with a technical observation that's important. He writes, I hope you're honest enough to point out that the weapon used was a fully auto rifle, which is not something anyone can just go buy. There's very little chance, if any, that it was legally obtained, William says, and no amount of gun laws will prevent someone determined from obtaining something like this on the black market. There you have from William a mix of fact and opinion. We want to sort the two from one another. Brandon Riddiman, our politics guy, is here to do that. There are some common talking points about guns and gun control that really seem to be strained by the facts of this shooting. Yeah. The good guy with a gun will stop a bad guy with a gun argument, and then this idea that if you ban certain types of guns, they'll no longer be an issue.
Which was the point that that viewer was raising, the idea that automatic weapons are outlawed and therefore, that would help, obviously falls apart here. They are effectively banned in the U.S., but that didn't stop them from being used in this attack. We don't have all the facts about exactly what makes of guns were used, but we do know the police found one of them that had a bump mod. It's a modification. I was looking at a video for one of these, Kyle, today. It's basically a big piece of plastic you slide over the back of the gun, and it uses the force of the recoil to push it into your finger It makes a semi-automatic weapon act like an automatic weapon.
Not expensive, not complicated.
Not terribly, no. And then on the good guy with a gun argument, that good guy in this case would have had to have been across the street inside a hotel 32 floors up. And we saw one of the guitarists at the scene who said he changed his mind on this very issue because there were people with guns in his crew. And he said there was no way they were going to be able to hit the shooter through that window all the way across the street at night. Just the facts of this case didn't work for that.
Reinforces the fact that the debate that often seems so simple in 140 characters online is not that simple at all. So when it comes to a lot of the political arguments, the predictable arguments that we heard today, we heard two voices in Colorado that broke from their respective herds nationally.
Yeah, Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, a Democrat who's actually signed gun control into law after the 2012 Aurora Theater shooting. He's not calling for more gun laws as of this point right off the bat. He got asked about gun control this afternoon, and here's what he said.
Maybe not immediately. It certainly shouldn't be brought up as the first thing, but let's get the facts. You know, and really understand exactly what happened, how he acquired these guns. Evidently, there were multiple guns. By at least the early accounts, and you probably have more recent information than I do, that these were, you know, weapons of warfare. But I don't have all the facts yet.
So he's saying he wants to learn more about this specific case, while other Democrats nationally did absolutely argue for more gun control and some of the ideas we've already seen debated before, like a new version of the old federal assault weapons ban or restrictions on internet sales of ammo. And on that side, a lot of folks are blaming the NRA for a lot of things. But interestingly, the NRA didn't have a statement for us when we came asking today about this shooting. However, a Colorado voice, Dudley Brown, who heads a competing gun rights group that's pretty influential in Colorado politics, did. He said, sadly, anti-gun zealots in Washington are already clamoring to exploit the pain and suffering of the victims, calling for more of the same failed gun control policies that contribute to this kind of atrocity. This is the time for comforting the victims and coming together to support our neighbors. It is not the time to push a worn-out gun control agenda, so not shy about mixing it up, even if the NRA is trying to kind of keep quiet.
And as we have mentioned here before, any honest discussion about really making a dent on this issue has to talk about gun confiscation, because there are 300+ million guns in America. You can't just simply talk about guns going forward and not looking at guns going back, no matter which side of the debate you're on. That's a fact.
And that's a much trickier proposal, because having all those guns out there, people don't want to give them up.
Brandon Ritterman, thank you. Because this shooting happened at a destination event in a destination city, there are now Americans headed back home all over the U.S. carrying firsthand accounts of what happened. We caught up with a few when they landed at DIA, including a man named Thaddeus Oliveris, who lives in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. He was at that concert with his wife.
The concert, did the 3-day event, and the last show was Jason Aldean. We thought it was fireworks, and after the second round, we realized it was gunfire, and we all hit the deck, and after that, bullets started flying everywhere. And at that point, you could hear them whiz by your, it didn't sound very far from your head, then it was hitting the bleachers right where we were sitting. And then when he went to go switch his magazine or switch the guns, that sounds like he had multiple guns.
You've asked us to zero in on the first responders rather than the shooter. Look for the helpers, as Mr. Rogers famously said. Nancy Marshall wrote, focus on the victims, the heroes, those who are directly impacted. And that's what 9 Wants to Know investigative reporter Chris Vanderveen has done for a long time, both with the Aurora Theater shooting and now with this shooting. Chris, we were astounded by the scope of the carnage with the Aurora Theater shooting and the impact on hospitals and first responders, and then this.
Think about it this way. University Hospital took in 23 patients the night of the Aurora Theater shooting. One hospital in the Las Vegas area took in more than 100 in one night. And that's really what's going to stick with me throughout all of this, is the fact that one hospital took in 5 times the amount of people that we had here in Colorado in one night. University Hospital, a large hospital, metropolitan area, they were overwhelmed. Think about what that might be for an area hospital in Las Vegas. It is overwhelming. There
was something that caught my ear this morning from a law enforcement official in Las Vegas at the press conference who said, unlike some cities, we work well with our firefighters. They teamed up with us and went in. And all of a sudden I thought, this is Chris Vanderveen's reporting about Scene Safe in Aurora and whether or not firefighters rushed in at the speed at which police wanted. And there's all this talk for years.
This reminds you of how important important it is for local police departments to do that training with their fire departments to know at the end, when this type of a situation arises, will they be able to go in with the police department and feel safe doing so? Aurora reminded people that you need to feel safe in order to go in. Otherwise, they're not going in.
You've listened to scanner traffic from both. Did it seem all that different this time?
You hear a lot of the same things. You hear a lot of people being wrapped up, being put up into police cars, and that was really sort of the challenge in Aurora, and even more so in Las Vegas.
Chris, thank you so much. When Next returns, we'll talk about what local venues are proactively doing here to ensure your safety. And a police psychologist talks to us about how we can all conquer fear. Our next question comes from a couple of you regarding security of large public spaces here in Colorado. Katie writes, can you find out what local venues have set up for security protocols for concerts and events? Matt says, I want to know what the city's doing proactively to make our city safer and more prepared. And you know, our Marshall Zellinger has been investigating this on Next for months after each time that America staggered by a mass shooting. We found that some public venues and police agencies won't tell much. Basically, we'll tell you the plan, people, when disaster strikes. Others, including the police chief who watches over Fiddler's Green, is being publicly proactive about imagining the worst and preparing. He's currently worried about drones. He spoke with Marshall today.
As an open-air venue surrounded by buildings with high windows, Fiddler's Green is the closest example to a concert venue like outside the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas.
We're constantly looking at ways to prevent people from being able to get in with ill motives.
Which is why Greenwood Village Police Chief John Jackson wants to ban drones within 1 mile of an open-air event in his city.
From one end of the spectrum of it simply falling out of the sky onto someone's head with rotary propellers, or somebody that could put something on a drone and either drop it or launch it. It's really important that you stay out ahead of it and you're proactive as opposed to reactive.
Coincidentally, the drone ordinance was supposed to be heard for the first time at City Council tonight, but it was pulled off the agenda this afternoon. Fiddler's Green is done for the season. Red Rocks, though, is hosting Kings of Leon tonight. We checked. You'll see the same security you always do. Random wanding and full bag checks. At the Great American Beer Festival at the Convention Center this weekend, everyone, including vendors, will have to go through metal detectors. The Broncos have a bye this weekend, but are talking with local law enforcement and the NFL before making any changes to security for next weekend. If the Rockies win Wednesday, they'll eventually get a home playoff game, and metal detectors will still be in place at Coors Field. Tonight, the Pepsi Center hosts WWE. No one there got back to us, but Pepsi Center was the first local venue to start using metal detectors in 2013.
They are so well past this idea that it can't happen here. The preparation is very real, and not everybody ascribes to the secrecy idea.
Well, we want to know what to do if it happens, and the chief has tried to convince me it's more about their own practices, and he shared some video with me. Chief John Jackson showed me his tactical gear. It's basically, how do you become a SWAT officer in a minute? It costs $2,000, and each officer in Greenwood Village has it, paid for by the Police Foundation in Greenwood Village. It's a bulletproof vest that can stop bullets like those involved in Las Vegas. It has an enhanced headset capability for better communication, and you can see the helmet that the other officer there is wearing. The chief tells me he can get into his gear in 70 seconds and then go in, no SWAT team required.
That's astonishing to think about the next time you see an officer out there at Fiddler's Green directing traffic and you're thinking, oh, what a cush job. 70 seconds there in SWAT gear and going after a shooter.
Sitting in their car.
Wow. All right, Marshall, thank you. It has been very discouraging today to hear just how many of you say you feel like you need to change your daily routines out of fear. We'll talk about how to get past that next. Something's largely lost in the debate over whether the Las Vegas shooting was domestic terrorism. You can argue whether the intent, when we learn it, fits the definition. Intent aside, the outcome is that people feel terrorized. Lynette told us, I didn't want to send my kids to school today because the shooter took away my feeling of them being safe. Danielle, on days like this, and sadly there are way too many days like this, I feel tiny, scared, powerless. Lynn wrote, I don't want to give in to it, but I'm just scared. Scared to take my girls to places and events that we would love as a family, scared to travel, scared to be in normal places doing normal things. With these things happening so often, I can't stop being afraid. So let's talk about conquering fear. My colleague Anastasia Bolton has that.
Dr. Evan Axelrod, you've dealt with a number of mass shootings. You counsel first responders, that is police and firefighters, through those, and to name a few, Aurora Theater, Bailey, Youth with a Mission. People are scared and they're telling us that they're scared. What can you tell them to make them feel better if you can?
I think that they need to understand that it's normal to feel that way. When something like this happens, their comfort zone is shattered and they're scared and they don't want to do what they normally do. And I think understanding that's normal, first and foremost, but then also realizing that part of the way that you rebuild that comfort zone is that you do go out and you do things with your family and you go to places and you continue to try to live life as normal.
And one thing we're talking about, not to wait too long, right?
Yeah, we're talking about this comfort zone shattering. What we see is that if people don't actively push that comfort zone back out and again get back to living, there can be a point where people get to the point where psychologically they can't go out and do things. They won't go to concert again. They won't go to theaters again. So it's important that they don't wait too long before at least trying to push themselves.
And one really quickly, a couple of sentences. Children, how do you address this with the kids?
Be honest with the kids. We either try to tell them too little or too much. Just be honest, they can handle it.
Okay, thanks so much, Dr. Evan Axelrod. Kyle?
There are resources on the next section of 9news.com if you or someone you know is struggling today. Next, viewer Nicole Vasquez and others asked how you can help personally. Well, for starters, you can donate blood. Even here, it helps. Appointment information is on the next Facebook page. If you're in a position to give financially, I would suggest sticking to the official funds for the victims, which were started by the city of Las Vegas. That, too, is on our Facebook page. We're back with a reporters' roundtable on what we can be doing better. Next. We're back to address your feedback about the role of the media today following the Las Vegas shooting. Jennifer writes, I think it'd be a good start to stop regurgitating the same news over and over again. Jennifer, one thing to keep in mind is that people tune in at different times. People haven't always seen what you've seen, and if it's too much, turn it off. That's often the best thing for your mental health. Judy asks, why do reporters ask such stupid questions? Well, Judy, I can tell you as somebody who has been on the door of grieving parents when I don't want to be there and they don't want me there, that that's a terrible situation for everybody involved, and the hope is that we just show a little kindness in the end. I want to bring in the rest of the team who's been working on this today to talk about what we as the media might be doing better. Sadly, we have all had experiences covering mass shootings. Brandon?
Yeah, one thing I think we can improve, and I've seen improving, is dealing with these crazy viral things that just pop up. A good example is this morning on the Today Show when ISIS was claiming responsibility for all this. They were very careful to say no one in an official capacity in the U.S. has confirmed that. I thought that was good.
Anastasia, something that we could be doing better.
I think we should keep it victim-centric, and we should continue having a conversation about naming the shooter and doing it maybe first day, explaining why we're doing it, and then moving on.
Chris Vanderveen.
Add depth, add perspective, stop the surface level reporting, and don't present it as if there's going to be easy solutions to what I think is a magnificently difficult problem to solve.
Marshall Zellner.
I'm guilty of this myself, giving victims a breath. Don't go rushing to them as soon as they walk out of the scene, asking them 5 minutes worth of questions. We'll get the story eventually. No need to be right there as they're coming out shirtless, covered in blood.
We appreciate your perspectives, all of you being here. And again, we still do welcome all of your questions and your concerns. Feel free to send them to us and continue this discussion. This allows us to have a more guided discussion about what is most important to you so that we can get you useful answers and hopefully foster a community conversation that, as Chris said, goes beyond the simple and gets to the useful. Thank you for being here. See you next time.